Marcus Chen had always been the kind of person who noticed things others missed. Growing up in the cramped corridors of Station Gamma 7, a mining outpost on the edge of human space, he learned early that survival meant paying attention to details. The soft hiss of an air recycler about to fail. The subtle shift in gravity that meant the station's rotation was off. The way people's voices changed when they were lying. So when he heard the faint whimpering echoing through the abandoned sections of the station, he knew it wasn't human. The outer rings of Gamma 7 had been sealed off for 3 years now, ever since the mining corporation decided the asteroids remaining wasn't worth maintaining full life support. Most of the residents had been relocated to the inner sections or transferred to other facilities. Marcus was one of the few who had chosen to stay, working maintenance on the skeleton crew that kept the station's essential systems running. The sound came again as he made his routine inspection of the environmental controls in Section C7. It was weak, almost like a kitten's cry, but there was something else to it. Something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. In his 15 years on the station, Marcus had never heard anything like it. He followed the sound through corridors that hadn't seen proper lighting in months, using only the beam of his work light to navigate the familiar passageways. The air grew thinner as he moved further from the main life support systems, and he had to adjust his portable breathing unit twice. The whimpering grew stronger as he approached what used to be the hydroponics bay in subsection C7 Delta. The massive room had once fed half the station's population with its vertical gardens and protein farms. Now it was a hollow shell, the growing towers stripped for salvage and the nutrient pools drained and cleaned. Marcus pushed through the broken airlock doors and swept his light across the cavernous space. The beam caught something that shouldn't have been there. In the far corner, huddled against what remained of a growing tower's support structure, was a creature unlike anything in the human databases. It was roughly the size of a house cat, but that's where any resemblance to Earth fauna ended. Its body was covered in scales that shifted from deep blue to silver as his light played across them. For legs ended in what looked like tiny hands rather than paws, each finger tipped with a claw that gleamed like polished metal. Its head was elongated, almost serpentine, but with large, expressive eyes that reflected his light like mirrors. Wings. The creature had wings, though they were folded tight against its body and appeared damaged. One wing hung at an odd angle, and Marcus could see tears in the delicate membrane. A dragon. His mind supplied the word from old Earth mythology, though he had never believed such things could exist outside of stories and virtual reality simulations. The creature watched him approach with obvious fear, pressing itself further back against the support structure. It tried to spread its wings in what might have been a defensive display, but the injured wing wouldn't extend properly, and the effort only made it cry out again in that pitiful whimpering sound. "Easy there," Marcus said softly, though he had no idea if the creature could understand human speech. "I'm not going to hurt you." He stopped about 3 meters away and crouched down, making himself appear smaller and less threatening. The dragon's eyes tracked his every movement, but it seemed to relax slightly when he didn't come any closer. Up close, Marcus could see that the creature was in bad shape. Besides the injured wing, there were scrapes and cuts along its flanks, and it was clearly malnourished. Its scales, which probably should have been bright and lustrous, were dull and some were missing entirely. Whatever had happened to bring this creature to his station, it had been through hell to get here. "You're hurt," Marcus observed, keeping his voice low and steady. "And hungry, I'd guess. When's the last time you ate anything?" The dragon tilted its head at the sound of his voice, and Marcus was struck by the intelligence he saw in those large eyes. This wasn't some mindless beast. Whatever this creature was, it was smart. Smart enough to understand that he was trying to communicate, even if it couldn't understand the words. Marcus slowly reached into his toolkit and pulled out a nutrient bar. It was standard emergency ration, designed to provide complete nutrition for humans in crisis situations. He had no idea if it would be safe for the dragon, but the creature was clearly starving. "I don't know if you can eat this," he said, holding the bar where the dragon could see it. "But it's food. Good food." He broke off a small piece and tossed it gently toward the creature, making sure not to throw it directly at the dragon but rather to land it within reach. The dragon sniffed at the fragment cautiously, then picked it up with one of its hand-like front paws and examined it closely. After a moment's hesitation, it took a tentative bite. Its eyes widened, and it quickly devoured the rest of the piece. When it looked back at Marcus, some of the fear had been replaced by cautious hope. "Good, huh?" Marcus smiled and broke off another, larger piece. "Here, have some more." Over the next 20 minutes, he fed the dragon piece by piece, gradually moving closer until he was sitting just arm's length away. The creature never took its eyes off him, but it seemed to accept his presence as long as he moved slowly and kept his voice calm. When the nutrient bar was gone, Marcus found himself in an unexpected dilemma. He couldn't just leave the creature here. It was injured, malnourished, and clearly couldn't survive on its own in the abandoned sections of the station. But he also couldn't exactly walk into the inhabited areas carrying what appeared to be a mythological creature and expect a warm welcome. The mining crews who worked Gamma 7 were practical people, focused on quotas and profit margins. They had little patience for mysteries, and even less for anything that might disrupt their carefully regulated lives. If they saw the dragon as a threat, they might try to kill it. If they saw it as valuable, they might try to capture and sell it. Neither option sat well with Marcus. "What am I going to do with you?" he wondered aloud. The dragon made a soft chirping sound and tried again to spread its wings. This time Marcus got a better look at the injury. The wing membrane was torn in several places, but the tears looked clean rather than ragged. Not the kind of damage that came from an accident or a predator attack. These looked deliberate. Surgical. Someone had cut this creature's wings. The realization hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some wild animal that had wandered into the station. This was a prisoner. Someone had deliberately crippled this intelligent creature, and it had somehow escaped. "Jesus," he breathed. "What did they do to you?" The dragon seemed to sense his change in mood and made another soft sound, almost like it was trying to comfort him. It reached out with one tiny hand and gently touched his wrist. The moment their skin made contact, Marcus felt something he had never experienced before. It was like a warm current flowing through his body, starting at the point of contact and spreading outward. For just an instant, he could have sworn he felt what the dragon was feeling. Pain, yes, but also gratitude. Relief. And, underneath it all, a deep, abiding loneliness that echoed his own. The connection lasted only a second before the dragon pulled its hand back, but the memory of it lingered. Marcus stared at the small creature with new understanding. "You're not just intelligent," he said quietly. "You're telepathic." The dragon tilted its head again, and Marcus thought he saw something like confirmation in its expression. This changed everything. If the dragon was telepathic, then it might be able to communicate in ways that went beyond language. It might even be able to help him understand what had happened to it, and who was responsible. But, first, he had to get it somewhere safe. "Listen," he said, though he wasn't sure if the dragon understood his words or was picking up his intentions telepathically. "I'm going to help you, but we need to be smart about this. There are people on this station who wouldn't understand. People who might hurt you if they found you." The dragon made another chirping sound, and Marcus felt that same warm current, though fainter this time. It was trying to communicate, he realized. Trying to share something with him. Images flashed through his mind. Not his own memories, but something else. A sterile white room filled with beings in environmental suits. Instruments that gleamed with sharp edges. Pain. Fear. The sensation of flying, then falling, then nothing. "They were experimenting on you," Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. "Those bastards were cutting you up to see how you worked." The dragon's eyes seemed to dim at the memory, and it pulled its damaged wing closer to its body. Marcus had worked in corporate facilities long enough to know how these things went. Some research division had found something unprecedented, something that could advance human knowledge or technology by decades. They would have set up a black site research facility, probably on one of the outer rim stations where oversight was minimal and questions were rarely asked. But something had gone wrong. The dragon had escaped, probably during transport or transfer. It had made its way to Gamma 7, maybe drawn by the life support emissions or simply flying blind until its strength gave out. Now it was his responsibility. "I've got a place," he told the dragon. "It's not much, but it's safe. Private. I can set up proper life support, get you some real medical attention for that wing." The dragon looked at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. It was such a human gesture that Marcus almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about their situation. He carefully gathered the small creature in his arms, surprised by how light it was. The dragon tensed for a moment, then relaxed against him, apparently deciding to trust him completely. As they made their way back through the abandoned corridors, Marcus could feel its tiny heart beating rapidly against his chest. His quarters were in the outer ring of the inhabited section, a small efficiency unit that he had modified extensively over his years on the station. Unlike most of the crew, who treated their quarters as temporary housing, Marcus had made his space into a real home. He had expanded the living area by converting what used to be a storage closet, installed upgraded environmental controls, and even managed to create a small workshop where he could work on personal projects. More importantly, his quarters had independent life support systems. As a senior maintenance technician, Marcus had been granted certain privileges that allowed him to modify his environmental controls for his work needs. What the station administrators didn't know was that he could completely isolate his quarters from the main life support grid if necessary. He sealed the door behind them and activated the privacy locks. The dragon looked around the small space with obvious curiosity, its eyes taking in the improvised furniture, the wall displays showing images of old Earth, and the various mechanical projects that filled every available surface. "Home sweet home," Marcus said, gently setting the dragon down on his sleep couch. "Let me get you some proper food and take a look at that wing." He rummaged through his emergency supplies and found a medical kit that included tissue repair gel and pain inhibitors. The food was more of a challenge. He had no idea what dragons ate, but he suspected that standard human rations weren't going to be sufficient for long-term care. While he worked, the dragon explored his quarters with careful movements, clearly favoring its injured side. It showed particular interest in his workshop, spending several minutes examining a half-finished gravity regulator that he had been tinkering with in his spare time. "You understand technology," Marcus observed as he prepared the medical supplies. "That makes sense, if you're intelligent. Your people probably have their own science, their own tools." The dragon made the chirping sound again, and Marcus felt another brief flash of connection. This time the images were different. Vast structures that seemed to be grown rather than built, reaching out toward alien stars. Beings like the dragon, but larger, soaring through crystalline cities that sparkled with their own internal light. "That's your home," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "That's where you come from." The dragon's expression grew sad, and it pressed closer to the wall as if trying to make itself smaller. Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. Whatever had happened to this creature, whoever was responsible, they had torn it away from everything it knew and loved. They had crippled it, imprisoned it, and treated it like a laboratory specimen. "Well, you're safe now," he said firmly. "I don't know how we're going to manage this long term, but you're safe." He spent the next hour carefully cleaning and treating the dragon's injuries. The creature was remarkably patient, holding still even when the tissue repair gel obviously stung. Its wing was in worse condition than he had initially thought. The membrane could be healed, but the tears had been made with surgical precision. Someone had been very deliberately studying the dragon's anatomy. "This is going to take time to heal properly," Marcus explained as he applied the last of the repair gel. "But you should get full function back eventually. Dragons are probably pretty resilient, right?" The dragon seemed to understand, nodding again in that disturbingly human way. When he was finished with the medical treatment, it curled up on his sleep couch and watched him move around the small quarters. Marcus found himself facing a dozen practical problems. Food was the most immediate concern, but there was also the question of long-term concealment. He could probably keep the dragon hidden in his quarters for a few days, but eventually someone would notice irregularities in his behavior or his resource consumption. Beyond that, there was the larger question of what to do next. The dragon was clearly intelligent, possibly more intelligent than humans. It had technology, or at least came from a civilization that had technology. If he could find a way to communicate properly with it, he might learn things that could revolutionize human understanding of the galaxy. But that would require trust, time, and resources that he simply didn't have on Gamma 7. As he worked through the possibilities, Marcus became aware that the dragon was watching him with unusual intensity. Its large eyes tracked his every movement, and occasionally it would make soft sounds that seemed almost like it was trying to speak. "You want to tell me something," he realized. "Something important." The dragon nodded emphatically and moved closer to him. When it reached out to touch his hand again, Marcus didn't pull away. The connection was stronger this time, more controlled. Instead of random flashes of memory and emotion, he received something that felt almost like structured communication. It wasn't language, exactly, but it was close enough that his mind could interpret it as meaning. The dragon had a name, though it was something his human vocal cords could never pronounce. It translated roughly as Singer of the Wind Between Stars, but Marcus found himself thinking of it simply as Singer. Singer came from a world that orbited a distant star, part of a civilization that was ancient when humans first learned to make fire. Her people were explorers and artists, using their natural ability to survive in vacuum to travel between worlds without the need for massive ships or life support systems. 3 months ago, Singer had been part of a long-range exploration mission, mapping new star systems and cataloging potential resources. Her group had been investigating an asteroid field when they encountered human ships for the first time. The first contact had gone badly. The humans had seen Singer's people as a threat, or perhaps as valuable specimens. There had been weapons fire, capture nets, and a running battle through the asteroid field. Singer had been one of 7 members of her exploration team who were captured. The humans had taken them to a research facility hidden in the outer system of a red dwarf star. For weeks, Singer and her companions had been subjected to tests, examinations, and experiments designed to understand their physiology and abilities. The wing cutting had been part of an attempt to prevent escape, but it had also served as a way to study their flight mechanisms. One by one, Singer's companions had died under the experimentation. Some from the stress of captivity, others from surgical procedures that went wrong. Singer was the last survivor when the opportunity for escape finally came. A malfunction in the facility's security systems had given her a window of opportunity. She had managed to break free from her containment cell and reach the docking bay where her captors kept their ships. Weak and injured, she had stolen a small courier vessel and fled into space. But her injuries and inexperience with human technology had made the escape a near disaster. She had crashed the stolen ship into the first station she could find, barely managing to reach Gamma 7 alive. When the connection faded, Marcus found himself staring at Singer with a mixture of horror and admiration. What she had endured was beyond his ability to fully comprehend, but what struck him most was her incredible resilience. Anyone else would have been broken by such an experience. Instead, Singer had found the strength not just to survive, but to escape and continue fighting. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I'm so damn sorry that happened to you." Singer made another soft sound and touched his hand again, but this time the contact carried only warmth and gratitude. She wasn't looking for pity. She was looking for partnership. Marcus understood that he was at a crossroads. He could try to keep Singer hidden on the station, but that was a short-term solution at best. Eventually she would be discovered, and, when that happened, the people responsible for her capture might come looking for her. Or the station administrators might decide she was too valuable to let go. But there was another option. A more dangerous option, but one that might actually lead somewhere positive. "We need to get you home," he said. "Back to your people. They need to know what happened to you, and they need to know that there are humans out there who did this." Singer's eyes widened, and Marcus felt a surge of hope from her that was so strong it almost overwhelmed him. "It won't be easy," he continued, thinking through the logistics. "I'd have to leave the station, probably permanently. I'd need a ship, supplies, navigation data. And we'd have to be careful not to lead anyone back to your homeworld. But, even as he spoke, Marcus realized that his mind was already made up. Singer represented something unprecedented in human history. First contact with an intelligent alien species. The chance to establish peaceful relations with a civilization that might have technologies and knowledge beyond human understanding. More than that, though, she was a person who had been wronged by members of his own species. She deserved justice, and she deserved to go home. "There's a problem though," Marcus said. "I can't do this alone. I'm a maintenance technician, not a pilot or an explorer. I don't have access to the kind of resources we'd need for an interstellar journey." Singer tilted her head and made a questioning sound. "I'd need help from other humans," Marcus explained. "People I could trust. People who would be willing to risk everything to do the right thing." The problem was that Marcus had spent most of his adult life deliberately avoiding deep relationships with his fellow humans. He was friendly enough with his co-workers, but he had never allowed anyone to get close enough to really know him. It was a survival strategy he had learned early in life, but it left him with very few people he could turn to in a crisis. Still, there were a few possibilities. Rebecca Torres, the station's chief medical officer, had always struck him as someone with strong ethical principles. James Park, who ran the communications array, had once confided to Marcus that he felt guilty about the way the mining corporations treated the Outer Rim populations. If he could convince even one or two people to help them, it might be enough. "I'm going to need some time to think this through," Marcus told Singer. "And I'm going to need to be very careful about who I approach. If the wrong person finds out about you, we'll both be in serious trouble." Singer nodded her understanding, then curled up on the sleep couch again. The medical treatment and the stress of communication seemed to have exhausted her, and within minutes she was sleeping peacefully. Marcus sat in his improvised workshop and stared at the small dragon who had changed his life in the space of a few hours. Tomorrow, he would have to return to his regular duties, maintaining the fiction that nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and there was no going back. For the first time in years, Marcus Chen had found something worth fighting for. Someone worth protecting. And he was going to do whatever it took to get Singer home safely, even if it meant giving up everything he had built on Gamma 7. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, Marcus thought, remembering a quote from an old Earth philosopher. He had spent 15 years on this station being exactly the person everyone expected him to be. Quiet, competent, reliable, invisible. But that man wasn't strong enough for what lay ahead. That man would play it safe, follow regulations, and let bureaucrats decide Singer's fate. Marcus had to become someone else. Someone willing to take risks, make enemies, and fight impossible odds for the sake of doing what was right. He looked at Singer's sleeping form and made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, she would not face it alone. And, when her people finally learned the truth about first contact with humanity, they would know that not all humans were monsters. Some of them, at least, were capable of choosing love over fear, justice over convenience, and courage over safety. Even if it cost them everything they had. Marcus spent the next 3 days walking a tightrope between his normal routine and the monumental secret sleeping in his quarters. During his shifts, he forced himself to maintain the same steady competence that had made him invisible for 15 years. He diagnosed problems with the environmental recyclers, replaced worn components in the artificial gravity generators, and filed his reports with the same methodical precision that had always characterized his work. But his mind was constantly elsewhere, running through scenarios and possibilities. Every time his communicator chimed, he half expected to hear that Singer had been discovered. Every time he passed a security checkpoint, he wondered if his increased stress levels were visible on the biometric scanners. Singer, for her part, adapted to captivity with remarkable grace. When Marcus returned to his quarters each evening, he found that she had spent her time exploring every inch of his small domain. She had discovered his collection of technical manuals and seemed fascinated by the diagrams and schematics, though whether she could actually read human text was unclear. More impressively, she had figured out how to use his food replicator. Marcus came home on the second day to find that she had successfully programmed the device to produce a protein-rich paste that more closely matched her nutritional needs than standard human fare. When he asked her about it through their telepathic connection, she conveyed the concept that her people had always been skilled at adapting to new environments and technologies. It was on the fourth day that Marcus finally worked up the courage to approach Dr. Rebecca Torres. Rebecca was in her early 40s, with graying hair and the kind of steady competence that came from 20 years of practicing medicine in frontier conditions. She had joined the Gamma 7 medical staff 3 years earlier, after her previous posting on a deep space research vessel had ended badly. Marcus didn't know the details, but station gossip suggested that she had blown the whistle on some kind of unethical research project and been quietly reassigned as punishment. If that was true, then she might be exactly the kind of person he needed. Marcus found her in the medical bay during the evening shift change, when the facility was nearly empty. She was updating patient records at her workstation, occasionally pausing to sip from a cup of what smelled like real coffee rather than the synthetic substitute most of the crew had to settle for. "Dr. Torres?" Marcus approached her workstation with what he hoped looked like casual confidence. "Do you have a minute? I wanted to ask you something." Rebecca looked up from her display and smiled. She had always been friendly toward Marcus, though they had never had more than superficial conversations about station maintenance issues that affected the medical bay. "Of course, Marcus. What's on your mind?" "It's a hypothetical question," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Professional ethics. If you discovered that someone was conducting illegal medical experiments on a sentient being, what would you do?" Rebecca's expression immediately became more focused. She set down her coffee cup and studied Marcus's face carefully. "That's a very specific hypothetical," she said slowly. "Are we talking about human experimentation?" "Not exactly human," Marcus replied. "But definitely sentient. Intelligent. Someone who could think and feel pain and understand what was happening to them." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see her mental gears turning. She was a doctor first and foremost, but she was also a person who had learned to be careful about who she trusted. "Marcus," she said finally, "why are you asking me this?" This was the moment of truth. Marcus took a deep breath and made his choice. "Because I've found someone who was the victim of exactly that kind of experimentation. And I need help from someone I can trust." Rebecca's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't immediately respond. Instead, she stood up and walked to the medical bay's main entrance, checking the corridor outside before sealing the door and activating the privacy screens. "Tell me everything," she said when she returned to her desk. Marcus told her about finding Singer in the abandoned section of the station. He described her injuries, her obvious intelligence, and the telepathic communication that had revealed the extent of her suffering. He was careful not to mention specific details about Singer's species or homeworld, but he painted a clear picture of what had been done to her. When he finished, Rebecca was quiet for several minutes. She stared at her hands, folded on the desk in front of her, and Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out across her features. "You're asking me to believe in aliens," she said finally. "I'm asking you to believe in me," Marcus replied. "I know it sounds impossible, but I can prove it. I can show you." "If what you're saying is true," Rebecca said slowly, "then this is the most important discovery in human history. First contact with an intelligent alien species." "Yes. And, instead of reporting it to the proper authorities, instead of ensuring that this person receives proper medical care and diplomatic protection, you're keeping them hidden in your quarters." Marcus felt his stomach sink. Rebecca's tone was becoming more clinical, more distant. He had misjudged her, and now he was going to lose everything. "Dr. Torres, you don't understand. The people who did this to her, they're probably still out there. If the corporate authorities find out about Singer, they'll either hand her back to her captors or they'll continue the experiments themselves. She'll never see her home again." "Singer? That's her name." "Well, sort of. The closest translation I can manage." Rebecca stood up and began pacing the small office space behind her desk. Marcus could see that she was wrestling with the implications of what he had told her, trying to balance her professional obligations against her personal ethics. You said she was telepathic. That she could communicate with you directly. Yes. It's not like the movies, where you can read each other's thoughts. It's more like shared emotions and images. But it's enough to have real conversations. And you're certain she's intelligent. Not just some kind of sophisticated animal. Marcus felt a flash of anger at the question, but he forced himself to remain calm. Rebecca was a scientist, and scientists needed evidence. She understands technology. She figured out how to reprogram my food replicator to meet her dietary needs. She's been studying my technical manuals. And, more than that, she has knowledge of her own civilization. Art, science, exploration. They were mapping new star systems when they were captured. Rebecca stopped pacing and looked directly at Marcus. This could destroy both of our careers, you know that, right? If you're wrong about this, if I'm seen as enabling some kind of delusion or cover-up, I'll never work in medicine again. And if we're right, Marcus replied, and we do nothing, then an innocent person continues to suffer. Someone tortures her, or kills her, or keeps her locked up in a laboratory for the rest of her life. I can't live with that, Dr. Torres. Can you? For a moment, the medical bay was completely silent except for the soft hum of the environmental systems. Then, Rebecca sank back into her chair and rubbed her temples. 3 years ago, she said quietly, I was the chief medical officer on a deep space research vessel. We found something out there. Something that shouldn't have existed according to our understanding of biology. The expedition commander wanted to bring it back alive for study, but I could tell it was intelligent. It was afraid. It was suffering. She looked up at Marcus with eyes that held old pain. I tried to stop them. I filed formal complaints, threatened to report them to the Medical Ethics Board, even attempted to sabotage the capture operation. In the end, they transferred me here and classified the whole mission. That creature probably died in some corporate laboratory, and there was nothing I could do about it. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. How many times had this happened? How many other intelligent beings had been captured, studied, and killed by human researchers who saw them as nothing more than valuable specimens? Help me make sure it doesn't happen again, he said. Rebecca was quiet for another long moment, then nodded slowly. I want to meet her. Tonight, after the shift change. If she's really what you say she is, then we'll figure out what to do next. Thank you, Marcus said, relief flooding through him. Don't thank me yet, Rebecca replied grimly. If we do this, we're not just risking our careers. We're probably committing treason against the colonial authority. They don't take kindly to people who interfere with corporate research interests. 2 hours later, Marcus stood outside his quarters with Dr. Torres, his heart racing as he prepared to enter his access code. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If Rebecca couldn't accept what she was about to see, then Singer's fate would be sealed. She's going to be scared at first, Marcus warned as he activated the door controls. She's been through hell, and she doesn't have any reason to trust humans in general. But she's not dangerous. She couldn't hurt us even if she wanted to. The door slid open, and they stepped into Marcus's quarters. Singer was perched on the back of his desk chair, apparently having been watching the door. When she saw Rebecca, she immediately spread her wings in a defensive posture and made a sharp hissing sound. Marcus heard Rebecca gasp behind him, but he was focused entirely on Singer. Through their telepathic connection, he could feel her fear and confusion. She recognized Rebecca as a potential threat, someone who might betray them both. It's okay, Singer, Marcus said softly, moving slowly into the room. This is Rebecca. She's a doctor, a healer. I told you I was going to find help, remember? Singer tilted her head and studied Rebecca with those large, intelligent eyes. After a moment, she folded her wings back against her body and made a questioning chirping sound. Jesus Christ, Rebecca breathed. She's beautiful. Marcus felt Singer's surprise through their connection. The dragon hadn't expected that reaction from a human. Singer, this is Dr. Rebecca Torres, Marcus said, gesturing toward Rebecca. Rebecca, meet Singer of the Wind Between Stars. Rebecca took a hesitant step forward, then stopped when Singer tensed again. May I examine her? Rebecca asked. As a doctor, I mean. I'd like to see how her injuries are healing. Marcus conveyed the request telepathically, and Singer considered it for a moment before nodding. She climbed down from the chair and moved to the center of the room, positioning herself where Rebecca could get a good look at her. For the next 20 minutes, Rebecca conducted the most gentle and thorough examination Marcus had ever witnessed. She started by simply observing Singer from a distance, noting her general condition and behavior. Then, with Singer's permission communicated through Marcus, she began a hands-on assessment of the dragon's injuries. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, Rebecca said grimly as she examined Singer's damaged wing. These incisions are precise, surgical. They were studying her anatomy, probably trying to understand how her flight mechanisms work. She gently probed the healing tissue where Marcus had applied the repair gel 3 days earlier. You did good work with the emergency treatment, but she's going to need more specialized care if she's going to regain full mobility. The muscle damage is extensive. Can you help her? Marcus asked. I think so. I have access to medical equipment that's designed for non-human physiology. We use it for treating some of the more exotic livestock that some of the mining crews bring aboard. With some modifications, I should be able to accelerate the healing process significantly. Singer made a soft sound and reached out to touch Rebecca's hand. When contact was made, Marcus saw Rebecca's eyes widen in surprise. She's in my head, Rebecca whispered. Oh God, she's showing me what they did to her. Rebecca's face went pale as Singer shared her memories of captivity and experimentation. Marcus watched the doctor's expression cycle through shock, horror, and, finally, burning anger. Those bastards, Rebecca said when the connection faded. Those absolute bastards. They knew she was intelligent. They knew she could feel everything they were doing to her, and they did it anyway. Singer withdrew her hand and looked between the two humans with something like hope in her expression. She wants to go home, Rebecca said. I can understand why. But, Marcus, do you have any idea how impossible that's going to be? We don't even know where her homeworld is, let alone how to get there. Singer can navigate, Marcus replied. Her people are natural space travelers. If we can find a way to get off this station, she can guide us to her system. And then, what? Assuming we somehow manage to make contact with her people, what happens next? It was a good question, and one that Marcus had been struggling with for days. Even if they successfully returned Singer to her homeworld, they would probably be stranded there. No human had ever made peaceful contact with an alien species. There were no protocols, no diplomatic frameworks, no guarantee that Singer's people wouldn't see them as just another threat to be eliminated. But there was also the possibility that they could establish genuine communication between the two species. If Singer's people were as advanced as her memories suggested, they might have technologies or knowledge that could benefit humanity. More importantly, they might be willing to share their perspective on the ethical treatment of intelligent life. We figure it out as we go, Marcus said finally. Right now, the important thing is getting Singer away from here before someone discovers her. Rebecca nodded slowly. Okay. But we're going to need help. More help than just the two of us can provide. I've been thinking about that. James Park, in communications. He's got access to ship registries, flight plans, communication protocols. If anyone can help us find a way off this station quietly, it's him. Can you trust him? I think so. He's complained to me before about corporate ethics, how the mining companies treat people like property. And he's got a clean record, no black marks or suspicious associations. Rebecca considered this for a moment, then nodded. Approach him carefully. Don't reveal everything at once. Just like you did with me. Test the waters first. What about Singer's medical treatment? How long will it take to get her wing properly healed? With the equipment I have access to, probably a week to 10 days. But that's assuming I can work on her without anyone else knowing about it. I'll need to set up some kind of cover story for why I'm using the veterinary medical suite after hours. Singer had been following their conversation with obvious attention, even though she couldn't understand the words. Now she made a questioning sound and looked at Marcus expectantly. Marcus conveyed the essence of their discussion telepathically, and Singer's response was immediate and strong. She was grateful for their willingness to help, but she was also concerned about the danger they were putting themselves in. Through the connection, Marcus got the sense that she felt responsible for their situation, as if her presence was causing them harm. "She's worried about us," Marcus told Rebecca. "She doesn't want us to get hurt because of her." Rebecca looked at Singer with new respect. "Tell her that helping her is our choice. And tell her that as a doctor, I took an oath to do no harm and to heal the sick. That applies to all intelligent life, not just humans." When Marcus relayed this message, Singer's emotional response was so strong that it brought tears to his eyes. Gratitude, relief, and something deeper. Trust. Complete, unconditional trust in these two humans who were willing to risk everything for her sake. "There's something else," Rebecca said quietly. "Something we need to consider. If we succeed in getting Singer home, we're going to have to face the consequences of our actions. The Colonial Authority will consider this theft of valuable alien assets. They'll probably classify us as terrorists or traitors." Marcus had thought about this, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel more real. "So we can never come back," he said. "Probably not. Are you prepared for that? Are you ready to give up everything you've built here, everyone you've known, for someone you met 4 days ago?" Marcus looked at Singer, who was watching him with those large, expressive eyes. She had been tortured, crippled, and imprisoned by members of his own species. She had every reason to hate humanity, to see them all as monsters. Instead, she had chosen to trust him, to believe that at least some humans were capable of compassion and justice. How could he do any less in return? "Yes," he said simply. "I'm ready." Rebecca smiled for the first time since entering his quarters. "Good. Then, let's figure out how to make this work." The three of them spent the next hour developing a preliminary plan. Rebecca would begin Singer's medical treatment immediately, using the veterinary suite during off hours and creating false records to cover her activities. Marcus would approach James Park within the next few days, testing his willingness to help with increasingly sensitive requests. Meanwhile, they would research possible escape routes from the station. Gamma 7 was a busy facility, with cargo ships, passenger transports, and mining vessels coming and going on a regular basis. If they could find a way to book passage on an outbound ship, or even stow away, they might be able to reach a larger station where their options would be greater. It wouldn't be easy. Station security was thorough, and all departing vessels were subject to inspection. They would need false documentation, a cover story for their travel, and probably some way to disguise Singer during transport. But it was possible. And, for the first time since finding Singer in the abandoned hydroponics bay, Marcus allowed himself to believe that they might actually succeed. After Rebecca left, Singer curled up on Marcus's sleep couch and watched him prepare for his next shift. Through their telepathic connection, he could feel her cautious optimism. She was still afraid, still damaged by her experiences, but she was beginning to believe that her nightmare might finally be coming to an end. "We're going to get you home," Marcus promised her. "Whatever it takes, we're going to get you home." Singer made that soft chirping sound that he had learned meant agreement or contentment. Then, she touched his hand one more time, sharing a brief flash of memory from her homeworld. Crystal cities reaching toward alien stars. Her people soaring through the void between worlds, free and unafraid. It was a future worth fighting for. A future worth risking everything to achieve. Marcus Chen had always been the kind of person who noticed things others missed. Now, as he prepared to challenge the most powerful institutions in human space, he realized that the most important thing he had ever noticed was his own capacity for courage when it mattered most. The weak man who had spent 15 years hiding in routine and anonymity was gone. In his place stood someone willing to burn down his entire world for the sake of justice. And that man would not be stopped by anyone or anything. James Park was exactly where Marcus expected to find him at 0300 hours, hunched over the main communications array in the station's central command center, nursing a cup of synthetic coffee and monitoring the endless stream of data that flowed between Gamma 7 and the rest of human space. James was a small, wiry man in his late 30s, with the pale complexion that came from spending most of his adult life in artificial environments. He had been the station's senior communications officer for 8 years, and in that time he had developed a reputation for being both extremely competent and chronically dissatisfied with the way the mining corporation treated its employees. More importantly, he had access to every incoming and outgoing transmission on the station, which meant he knew things about corporate operations that most people were never supposed to see. Marcus approached his workstation during the shift change, when the command center was temporarily understaffed and conversations were less likely to be overheard. "James," Marcus said, settling into the chair next to the communications array. "You got a minute?" James looked up from his displays and nodded. "Sure, Marcus. What's on your mind?" "I wanted to ask you about ship registrations. Specifically, how someone would go about booking passage on an outbound vessel without leaving too much of a paper trail." James's expression immediately became more cautious. In the Outer Rim, questions about unofficial travel arrangements usually meant someone was trying to avoid corporate oversight or legal entanglements. "That's an interesting question," James said slowly. "Any particular reason you're asking?" Marcus had spent hours preparing for this conversation, trying to find the right balance between honesty and caution. He needed James's help, but he couldn't reveal too much too quickly. "Let's say I had a friend who needed to leave the station quietly. No drama, no official complaints, just a clean departure for personal reasons. What would be the best way to make that happen? This friend wouldn't happen to be you, would it?" Marcus smiled. "Maybe." James was quiet for a moment, studying the displays in front of him. Marcus could see him thinking through the implications of the question, weighing his response carefully. "Well," James said finally, "hypothetically speaking, there are a few options. The easiest would be to book passage on a regular commercial transport, but those require full identification and travel authorizations. The Colonial Authority tracks all passenger manifests pretty carefully these days. What about cargo vessels? Trickier, but not impossible. Most cargo captains are willing to take on unofficial passengers if the price is right and the cargo isn't too sensitive. The problem is that cargo ships don't follow regular schedules, so you'd have to be flexible about departure times and destinations." Marcus nodded. This was roughly what he had expected to hear. "And if someone wanted to go really far off the grid? Like, completely outside corporate space?" James's eyebrows rose. "Now that's a much more serious question. Are we talking about running away to join the frontier colonies, or something even more extreme?" "More extreme. Jesus, Marcus. What kind of trouble are you in?" This was the moment of truth. Marcus took a deep breath and made his decision. The kind where doing the right thing puts you on the wrong side of some very powerful people. The kind where staying on this station could be dangerous for me and for people I care about. James stared at him for a long moment, then glanced around the command center to make sure they weren't being observed. "All right," he said quietly. "But if we're going to talk about this seriously, we can't do it here. Too many monitoring systems, too many people coming and going. Can you meet me in the observation deck in Section B after my shift ends?" "Of course." "And, Marcus? Whatever you're mixed up in, I hope you know what you're doing. The people who run these stations don't forgive and they definitely don't forget." 4 hours later, Marcus found James in the observation deck overlooking the asteroid mining operations. The vast chamber was dimly lit and usually deserted during the evening shift, making it one of the few places on the station where private conversations were actually possible. Through the reinforced transparasteel windows, they could see the massive mining machines working their way through the asteroid's surface, they're cutting beams carving out chunks of ore that would be processed into the metals and minerals that powered human civilization. It's beautiful, in a way, James said, staring out at the operation. All that organized destruction. Sometimes I wonder what this rock looked like before we got here. Probably just a dead chunk of stone drifting through space for millions of years, and now it's going to become starship hulls and habitat modules. James, Marcus said gently. We need to talk. I know. James sighed and turned away from the window. So tell me what's really going on. Over the next 20 minutes, Marcus told James an edited version of the truth. He explained that he had found someone who needed protection from corporate research interests, someone who had been the victim of illegal experimentation. He described the injuries he had seen and the evidence of deliberate torture. He was careful not to mention that Singer was an alien, or that she was telepathic. Instead, he presented her as a human subject who had escaped from a black site research facility and needed to be returned to her family. When he finished, James was quiet for a long time, staring out at the mining operations with a troubled expression. You're talking about corporate human experimentation, James said finally. That's not just illegal, it's a capital crime under colonial law. If what you're saying is true, then the people responsible could face life imprisonment or execution. I know. And you're asking me to help you move this person off the station without going through proper channels. You're asking me to help you obstruct a potential criminal investigation. Marcus felt his heart sink. James was thinking like a law-abiding citizen, not like someone willing to challenge the system for the sake of justice. James, you don't understand. The proper channels are compromised. The people who did this, they have connections throughout the corporate hierarchy. If we report this through official channels, my friend will disappear and we'll never see her again. Her? Marcus realized his slip and decided to roll with it. Her name is Sarah. She's in her early 20s, and she's been through hell. The things they did to her. James, I can't let them get their hands on her again. James turned to look at Marcus directly. You care about her. This isn't just about doing the right thing, is it? This is personal. It was personal, Marcus realized, though not in the way James was imagining. Singer had become important to him in a way that went beyond simple compassion or ethical obligation. She represented something pure in a universe that often seemed dark and corrupt. Protecting her meant protecting the possibility that intelligence and decency could triumph over cruelty and greed. Yes, he said simply. It's personal. James nodded slowly. All right. I can respect that. But, if we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. No half measures, no sloppy planning. If we get caught, we're not just losing our jobs. We could be looking at serious prison time. You think I'm going to let you handle this alone? James smiled grimly. Marcus, I've been monitoring corporate communications for 8 years. I've seen the reports they don't want the public to know about. Mining accidents that kill hundreds of workers and get covered up. Safety violations that put entire stations at risk. Research projects that violate every ethical standard ever written. He gestured toward the mining operation outside the window. I've always told myself that I was just doing my job, that it wasn't my responsibility to police corporate behavior. But, if you're telling me that someone is conducting human experimentation, and that I have the chance to help stop it, well, I guess it's time to decide what kind of person I really am. Marcus felt a surge of relief and gratitude. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. First, let's figure out if this is actually possible. Over the next hour, James walked Marcus through the practical challenges they would face. Station security was comprehensive, but it wasn't perfect. There were always gaps in coverage, windows of opportunity for someone who knew how the systems worked. The biggest challenge would be getting off the station without triggering the automated tracking systems. Every person who left Gamma 7 was supposed to be accounted for, with their departure logged and their destination recorded. But there were ways around the system, especially for someone with James's access to the communication and tracking networks. There's a cargo freighter due to arrive in 6 days, James explained, pulling up shipping schedules on his personal tablet. The Iron Mountain, Captain Sarah Reeves commanding. She's got a reputation for being flexible about her passenger manifest, and her next destination is the Kepler station in the Centauri system. That's outside corporate space, Marcus observed. Barely, but yes. Kepler is technically an independent station, though they maintain trade relationships with the major corporations. From there, you could book passage to any number of frontier worlds. What would it cost? For unofficial passage? Probably 10,000 credits, maybe more if Captain Reeves thinks you're running from something serious. Marcus winced. His savings account held less than 3,000 credits, and most of that was tied up in station investment funds that would take weeks to liquidate. I don't have that kind of money, he admitted. I do, James said quietly. 8 years of hazard pay and nothing to spend it on. I can cover the passage costs. James, I can't ask you to, you're not asking. I'm offering. Besides, if this goes wrong, money is going to be the least of our problems. They spent another hour working through the details of their escape plan. James would make contact with Captain Reeves when the Iron Mountain arrived, negotiating passage for 3 people to Kepler Station. Marcus would handle the logistics of moving Singer from his quarters to the docking bay without being detected. Dr. Torres would ensure that Singer was medically stable for the journey. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was workable. More importantly, it gave them a specific timeline and concrete objectives. As they prepared to leave the observation deck, James grabbed Marcus's arm. There's something else you need to know, he said seriously. I've been monitoring some unusual communication traffic over the past few days. Encrypted transmissions from a research vessel in the outer system. The encryption is corporate grade, which means whatever they're talking about is extremely sensitive. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Research vessel? The designation is RV-47, but that's just a code number. I don't have any information about what kind of research they're conducting, but the transmission patterns suggest they're looking for something. Or someone. How long have they been in the system? The transmissions started 4 days ago. 4 days ago was when Marcus had found Singer. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. They're looking for her, Marcus said with certainty. The people who held her prisoner, they know she escaped and they're trying to track her down. James nodded grimly. That's what I was thinking. Which means we're not just racing against station security anymore. We're racing against the people who originally captured your friend. How long before they find us? I don't know. If they're just monitoring standard communication channels, we might have time to execute our escape plan. But if they have more sophisticated tracking capabilities. James didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus understood the implications. We need to move faster, Marcus said. Can you try to contact Captain Reeves before the Iron Mountain arrives? Maybe arrange for an earlier pickup? I can try, but that's going to cost extra. A lot extra. Whatever it takes. They parted ways at the observation deck, each heading back to their respective quarters to prepare for what was coming. Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and terror as he made his way through the station corridors. In less than a week, they would either be free and on their way to helping Singer reach her homeworld, or they would be in custody facing charges that could destroy their lives. There was no middle ground anymore. When Marcus entered his quarters, he found Singer perched on his workbench, apparently studying a technical schematic for the station's life support systems. She looked up when he entered and made a questioning sound. We have a plan, Marcus told her, settling into his chair. And we have help. Dr. Torres and another friend are going to help us get you off this station. Singer tilted her head and touched his hand, establishing their telepathic connection. Marcus shared the details of their escape plan, and Singer's emotional response was immediate and complex. Excitement at the prospect of freedom, gratitude for their efforts, but also deep concern for the danger they were facing on her behalf. "Don't worry about us," Marcus said aloud. "We know what we're doing." Singer's response through the connection was gentle but skeptical. She had experienced enough human behavior to know that good intentions didn't always lead to good outcomes. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "James thinks the people who held you prisoner are looking for you. They have a ship in this system, and they're monitoring communications." Singer's reaction to this news was immediate and intense. Fear, yes, but also a blazing anger that surprised Marcus with its strength. Through their connection, he got flashes of memory from her captivity. The faces of her captors, the instruments they had used, the clinical detachment with which they had treated her suffering. But underneath the anger was something else. A fierce determination that matched Marcus's own. Singer had not endured everything she had been through just to be recaptured now. If her tormentors wanted her back, they would have to fight for her. "We won't let them take you," Marcus promised. "No matter what happens, we won't let them take you back to that place." Singer squeezed his hand and shared a brief image through their connection. Marcus saw himself as Singer saw him. Not just a human being who had chosen to help her, but something more. A protector. A friend. Someone who had looked at her suffering and chosen to act, regardless of the personal cost. It was humbling to see himself through her eyes, to understand the impact his decision was having on someone who had lost everything. 6 more days, he told her. 6 more days and we'll be off this station. Singer nodded and settled back onto his workbench, but Marcus could sense that she would not be sleeping much tonight. None of them would. The weight of what they were attempting was beginning to settle on all of them, and the knowledge that failure would mean not just disappointment but potential disaster. But there was no turning back now. Marcus had committed himself to Singer's rescue, and James and Dr. Torres had committed themselves to helping him. They were all in this together, for better or worse. Over the next 6 days, their plan came together with a precision that surprised Marcus. Dr. Torres worked miracles with Singer's medical treatment, using advanced tissue regeneration techniques to restore most of the function to her damaged wing. James made contact with Captain Reeves and negotiated passage to Kepler Station, though the cost was even higher than they had anticipated. Most importantly, they managed to avoid detection by the mysterious research vessel that continued to patrol the outer system. On the morning of their departure, Marcus stood in his quarters for the last time, looking around at the small space that had been his home for 15 years. He had packed only the essentials, clothing, personal documents, and a few mementos that he couldn't bear to leave behind. Everything else would have to stay. Singer perched on his shoulder, her weight barely noticeable but her presence reassuring. Her wing had healed remarkably well, and she could now fly short distances without difficulty. More importantly, her spirit seemed to have recovered along with her body. The broken, terrified creature Marcus had found in the abandoned hydroponics bay had been replaced by someone who radiated quiet confidence and determination. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked her. Singer touched his cheek briefly, sharing a flash of emotion through their connection. Gratitude, affection, and a promise. No matter what happened next, she would never forget what he had done for her. "All right then," Marcus said, picking up his travel bag. "Let's go home." The journey to the docking bay was the longest walk of Marcus's life. Every corridor seemed filled with potential dangers, every security checkpoint a possible trap. But James had done his work well, creating false maintenance orders that explained why Marcus was moving through restricted areas, and providing electronic cover that made them invisible to the automated tracking systems. Dr. Torres met them at the service entrance to Docking Bay 7, carrying a medical transport case that would conceal Singer during the boarding process. She looked as nervous as Marcus felt, but her hands were steady as she prepared the concealment device. "Singer will be fine in there for up to 30 minutes, she explained as she made final adjustments to the life support systems. "The case is designed for transporting live specimens, so she'll have everything she needs." Singer submitted to the confinement with obvious reluctance, but she understood the necessity. As the case sealed around her, Marcus felt a brief telepathic touch. Trust and determination flowing from her to him. They made their way through the docking bay with forced casualness, just 3 station personnel conducting routine business. The Iron Mountain was a typical mid-range cargo vessel, battered by years of service but obviously well-maintained. Captain Sarah Reeves met them at the airlock, a stocky woman in her 50s with the weathered look of someone who had spent her life in space. "You're Chen?" she asked Marcus. "That's right. James vouches for you, and that's good enough for me. But I want to be clear about the terms. I don't ask questions about why you're leaving, and you don't ask questions about how I run my ship. We reach Kepler Station in 12 days, you pay me the agreed amount, and we part ways. Understood?" "Understood. Good. Your quarters are on Deck 3, Section B. We launch in 20 minutes. As they made their way to their quarters, Marcus felt the weight of what they had accomplished beginning to sink in. They had done it. They had actually gotten Singer off the station, past security, past the corporate surveillance systems, past whatever forces were hunting for her. But he also knew that this was just the beginning. Getting off Gamma 7 was the easy part. The real challenges would come when they reached Kepler Station and had to figure out how to get Singer home to her people. Still, as the Iron Mountain's engines fired and the ship pulled away from the station, Marcus allowed himself to feel a moment of pure triumph. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. He had proven that truth in the most dramatic way possible, transforming himself from a passive observer into someone willing to risk everything for the sake of justice. Singer emerged from her transport case as soon as they were safely in their quarters, immediately flying to the small porthole that looked out into space. For the first time since Marcus had found her, she looked truly free. Through their telepathic connection, she shared her view of the stars with him. Not just points of light in the darkness, but pathways to worlds and wonders beyond human imagination. One of those points of light was her home, and, for the first time in months, she was traveling toward it instead of away from it. Dr. Torres and James joined them at the porthole, and the 4 of them watched as Gamma 7 dwindled into the distance behind them. "So," Dr. Torres said quietly. "What now?" "Now we figure out how to make first contact with an alien civilization," Marcus replied. "How hard could that be?" James laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. They all knew that the hardest part of their journey was still ahead of them. But they had taken the first step, and that was enough for now. Singer made that soft chirping sound that Marcus had learned meant contentment, and touched his hand one more time. In that brief contact, he felt something new. Hope. Real, honest hope for the first time and longer than he could remember. They were free, they were together, and they were heading toward a future that none of them could fully imagine. It was enough. Marcus Chen had spent his entire adult life trying to be invisible, trying to avoid drawing attention or making waves. But sometimes the most important thing a person could do was stand up and be counted, regardless of the consequences. He had destroyed his weak self, the man who would have walked away from Singer's suffering and pretended it wasn't his problem. In its place, he had become someone stronger. Someone who could face an uncertain future with courage and determination. And that man could never be destroyed by others, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and full of possibilities. Somewhere among them was Singer's home, and somehow they were going to find it. Together.